If I could go back 20 years and give my younger self a good hard shake, I'd do it in a heartbeat. I'm an old man now, and I've learned the hard way that the things you think are your greatest treasures can end up being the very things that bury you alive. I'm sitting here today with a heart full of regret and a bank account that looks a lot thinner than it should, all because I didn't know when to let go. I made a mistake, a massive, life altering mistake that I'm still paying for every single morning when I wake up. They call these the golden years. But let me tell you, there's nothing golden about realization when it comes too late. Now, before I tell you exactly what I should have sold and why it nearly ruined me, I want you to do something for yourself. Reach down and hit that subscribe button. I'm not looking for fame. I'm looking to make sure you don't end up sitting on a porch like this, wondering where your life savings went. If you stay with me until the end of this video, I'm going to show you how to avoid the trap I fell into. You're going to want to hear every word of this because the world is changing fast and the old rules don't work anymore. I worked 40 years. I did my time, I paid my taxes, and I bought into the big lie. The lie says that more is always better. We're taught to gather things. We're taught to collect assets like they're trophies. I thought I was being smart. I thought I was building a fortress that would protect me and my wife once the paycheck stopped coming. I had the big family home, the one with the 4 bedrooms we didn't use anymore. I had the cars in the garage that I only drove once a month, and I had a collection of things, items I spent decades hunting down that I was sure would be worth a fortune one day. I held onto them like a man drowning holds onto a rock. But here's the thing about holding onto a rock. When you're in deep water, it doesn't help you float. It just pulls you down faster. I remember my neighbor Bill. He sold everything 5 years before he retired. He moved into a small place, simplified his life, and put the cash where it could actually grow. I laughed at him. I told him he was giving up his legacy. I told him he'd regret leaving the big house behind. I thought I was the wise one. I thought my stuff made me wealthy. I didn't realize that every single thing I owned was actually a bill I had to pay. Every room I didn't use still had to be heated. Every car I didn't drive still needed insurance. Every item in my collection was just something else I had to worry about, clean, and protect. I was a servant to my own possessions, and I didn't even know it. I was waiting for the perfect time to sell. I was waiting for that one day when the market would be just right and I'd walk away a king. But let me tell you something about one day, it's a ghost. It never actually shows up. By the time I realized the weight of what I was carrying, the weight had already started to crush me. And that was just the beginning of the disaster. I stood in that big hallway one night, just listening to the silence of a house that was way too large for 2 people. It hit me right then. I wasn't living in a home anymore. I was living in a museum of my past, and museums are expensive to keep open. I had spent 40 years filling those rooms with furniture, gadgets, and memories. I thought every dollar I put into that house was like putting money in a vault. But the truth is, a house is only an asset if you can actually use the money tied up in it. For me, it was just a giant hungry beast that never stopped eating. I remember thinking I'd sell when the market hit a certain number. I had this magic figure in my head. I told my wife, just a few more years, honey. We'll wait for the peak. Well, let me tell you, the peak is a lot harder to see when you're standing on it than when you're looking back at it from the bottom of a hill. While I was waiting for that perfect price, the roof started leaking. Then the water heater gave out. Then the taxes went up. I was pouring thousands of dollars into a building that I only used 30% of. We lived in the kitchen and the bedroom, but I was paying to heat, cool, and repair a basement and 3 extra bedrooms that did nothing but collect dust and old clothes. And then there were my collections. I had a garage full of what I called investments, old tools, some vintage signs, a couple of project cars I was always going to get around to fixing. I'd tell anyone who'd listen that they were better than gold. I'd spend my weekends hunting for more, convinced I was building a fortune. But when the time finally came that I needed the cash, do you know what I found out? Finding a buyer who loves your junk as much as you do is a full-time job. And when you're 65 or 70, you don't want a full-time job. You want freedom. I had all this wealth sitting in boxes, but I couldn't buy a loaf of bread with a vintage wrench. I see folks doing it now the same way I did. They hang on to these things because they feel like they're letting go of their youth if they sell. They think they're being safe by keeping hold of physical stuff. But safety isn't found in a pile of things you don't use. Safety is found in being light on your feet. If I had sold that house and those cars 5 years sooner, I would have had a pile of cash sitting in a simple account, earning interest while I slept. Instead, I had a pile of chores and a stack of bills. I was working for my things instead of my things working for me. By the time I finally got around to trying to sell, the world had moved on. The things people wanted 10 years ago weren't the things they wanted anymore. I was stuck holding the bag, and the bag was getting heavier by the day. The worst part about realized mistakes is that they don't hit you all at once. They nibble at you. It's like a slow leak in a tire that you keep pumping air into, hoping it'll just fix itself. I kept telling myself that I was being patient. I thought patience was a virtue. But in the world of money and retirement, sometimes patience is just another word for being scared. I was scared to let go of the things that defined who I was when I was young and strong. I looked at my stocks and my properties and my collections, and I didn't see numbers on a page. I saw my sweat. I saw the overtime shifts I pulled in the summer heat. I saw the vacations we didn't take so I could buy just one more sure thing. And I remember sitting down with a young fella, a financial advisor, I guess you'd call him, about 6 years before I planned to hang it up. He looked at my portfolio and he looked at my lifestyle, and he said something that made me want to throw him out of my house. He told me, "Sir, you're rich in things, but you're poor in choices." And I didn't understand what he meant then. I thought he was just trying to get me to sell so he could make a commission, but he was trying to save my life. He was trying to tell me that when you're retired, you can't eat a brick. You can't pay the doctor with a piece of land that nobody wants to buy right now. I had these shares in a company I'd worked for decades ago. Everyone told me to keep them. They're a blue chip. They said they'll take care of you forever. I watched that stock price like a hawk for 30 years. It went up, it went down, but I never sold. I felt like selling was a betrayal of the company and my own history. But you know what the market doesn't care about? Your history. It doesn't care about your loyalty or how hard you worked for that money. One morning, the world changed. A new technology came out. A few bad decisions were made in a boardroom 1,000 miles away, and that sure thing started to bleed. I watched it drop 10%, then 20. My wife asked me if we should get out. I told her no. I told her it would come back. It always comes back. Wrong. It didn't come back. I sat there holding on to those shares because I couldn't admit I was wrong. I was waiting for the price to get back to where it was just so I could break even and feel smart again. That's the ego talking. And let me tell you, your ego is the most expensive thing you'll ever own. By the time I finally gave up and sold, I had lost more than half of what that money was worth at its peak. If I had sold when that young fella told me to, I'd have had enough to travel the world twice over. Instead, I had just enough left to buy a lesson I didn't want to learn. I stayed in the game too long because I didn't have an exit plan. I had a hope plan, and hope is a terrible strategy for your golden years. I see people doing it every day. They have these old cars or these pieces of land out in the country, and they say, I'll sell it when I need it. But when you need it, you're desperate. And when you're desperate, you get pennies on the dollar. You don't have the time to wait for the right buyer. You're at the mercy of the first person who shows up with a check. I didn't realize that the time to sell is when you're happy, when you're strong, and when you don't actually need the money. That's when you have the power. Once you retire, the clock starts ticking differently. Every month you spend holding on to a dead asset is a month of freedom. You're burning in the furnace. I burned years. It wasn't just the money I lost, though, that hurts enough to make your stomach turn. It was the time. You see, when you're young, you think you have all the time in the world to fix things, to clean things, and eventually to sell things. But when you hit 70, time starts to feel like water slipping through your fingers. And so I spent the first 3 years of my retirement fixing up that big old house just so I could finally put it on the market. Think about that for a second. I spent my freedom working a job I didn't want for a boss I didn't even like, and that boss was a pile of bricks and mortar. My knees aren't what they used to be. Climbing a ladder to clean our gutters isn't a weekend hobby anymore. It's a death-defying act. I should have been sitting on a beach or watching my grandkids play ball. Instead, I was cramped up in a crawl space under a house that was too big for me, trying to fix a pipe so I wouldn't lose value on a sale. I was trading my remaining health for a house I didn't even want to live in anymore. I was a prisoner to my own property. I look at my friend Charlie. Charlie did it right. He sold his place when he turned 60. He bought a little condo where someone else mows the lawn and someone else fixes the roof. When I call him, he's usually on a hiking trail or out at a diner with friends. When he calls me, I'm usually covered in grease or paint. He's out there living his life while I was stuck in a museum, dusting a dining room table that hadn't seen a guest in 5 years. We think we're keeping these things for our kids. But let me tell you a secret I learned too late. Your kids don't want your stuff. They have their own lives and their own tastes. They don't want to spend their weekends clearing out your basement any more than you do. By holding on to everything, I wasn't leaving a legacy. I was leaving a burden. I was holding on to a version of myself that didn't exist anymore. I was the guy with the big house and the guy with the car collection, but I wasn't that guy anymore. I was just an old man who was tired of being tired. I realized that the things you own end up owning you. And if you don't sell them when you have the energy to do it on your own terms, you'll end up forced to do it when you're weak. And the stress of it all took a toll on my heart and my marriage. We fought more in those first 2 years of retirement than we did in 30 years of working, all because of the weight of the things we didn't sell. We were drowning in value, but we didn't have a drop of peace. I finally did it. I sold it all, but I did it 10 years too late. When I finally signed those papers and watched the new owners walk into that big house, I didn't feel like a winner. I felt like a man who had just finished a marathon he never should have run in the first place. I moved into a small place near the water. It's got 2 rooms, a porch, and a view that doesn't cost me a dime in repairs. My life fits into a few boxes now, and for the first time in my life, I can actually breathe. But every time I look at my bank balance, I see the ghost money, the money that would have been there if I hadn't been so stubborn, so proud, and so afraid. The biggest mistake I made wasn't a math error. It was a heart error. I thought my identity was wrapped up in what I owned. I thought if I sold the big house and the fancy things, I'd do just be some old guy with nothing to show for his life. I was wrong. You are not your house. You are not your car. You are not your collection of vintage whatever it is. You are the time you have left on this earth. And I traded way too much of that time for things that ended up in a dumpster or a yard sale for $5. I spent the prime of my retirement years as a glorified security guard for a bunch of stuff I didn't even use. If you're watching this and you're still a few years out from retirement, or even if you're already there, listen to me. Don't wait for the perfect market. Don't wait until you're ready. You'll never feel ready to let go of your past. Do it anyway. Sell the house that's too big. Sell the cars you don't drive. Get rid of the boxes in the attic that you haven't opened since the 90s. Turn those things into cash and turn that cash into memories. Go see the world. Buy a nice meal. Sit on a bench and watch the sun go down without worrying about a leaking roof or a falling stock price. I'm telling you this because I want you to be like Charlie, not like me. I want you to have a retirement that is light and easy. I want you to wake up and ask, what do I want to do today? Instead of what do I have to fix today? It took me losing a lot of money and a lot of sleep to realize that the best things in life aren't things at all. They're the moments when you're not worried about your possessions. So take a look around your living room tonight. Look at the things you're holding on to. Ask yourself if they're making you happy or if they're just taking up space in your head and your heart. If they're just taking up space, let them go. Let someone else worry about them. You've worked hard enough. You've earned the right to be free. Don't let your treasures become your chains. Sell them now while you can enjoy the freedom they buy you. Trust me, the view from a smaller window is a whole lot clearer when you don't have the weight of the world on your shoulders. Thank you for sitting with me today. Go out there and start lightening your load. You won't regret it.